Welcome back to Visited by Voices Live. It is Monday. It is the last Monday show. No, we have one more Monday show of the month coming up, but as we're getting almost to October and I can feel it in the air. I feel like Phil Collins here. When I was a kid, I grew up, you could always tell, like as soon as you went back to school on the first or the third of the month, it already felt like autumn. It doesn't feel like that anymore at all. And I really resent that. This year, it feels a little closer to normal. So it's a good time as the seasons change and we all get into the Halloween spirit way too early because we're those kids. That I have a special guest today that also is in love with the season.
That is true.
Mr. Tim Meyer, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Now, I should mention, I'm going to run through your book titles, and I'm sure I'm going to miss something, so don't be afraid to correct me. Lim's a Love Story, The Switch House, Sharkwater Beach, 69, Black Star Constellations, In the House of Mirrors, the Demon Blood Trilogy, which is Enlightenment, Gateway, and Defiance, and Primal Terra.
Yeah, that sounds like most of them. There's probably more, but honestly,
I don't have all of them.
Oh, look at that.
I have some of them.
Look at that.
Look at that. It's like I care or something, right?
You do your research. I like that.
Well, it's funny. There's a lot of ways people get invited onto the show. And not that everyone who gets invited on the show accepts, but one of the ways is that if you're out there and you're a presence, and I run across you, whether it's because your book got recommended to me, whether it's because there's a social media post, whether it's because you just mentioned in passing, that's really not enough. I have to at least really believe in the product.
That's fair.
So when you came across my radar, the first thing I did is search high and low for a sample of your writing. And then once I had that, I decided to order a couple books.
Nice.
And what I can say is I think you have this amazing aesthetic, which is very filmic. It's very cinematic. And I don't know if that comes from how you grew up or where you first fell in love with the genre, but it's a very immediate, very visual form of storytelling.
Oh, well, thanks, man. That's one of the best compliments I've ever received in my writing. I definitely have a love for cinema, and not just horror, just cinema in general. So I think I tend to write very visually. So yeah, that's probably where that comes from. Growing up, I was like a huge Peter Benchley fan, which you probably gathered from Sharkwater Beach. So like his writing too is very cinematic, and he wrote with like you could just picture like whatever he was writing in the book. Michael Crichton too. I was a big Michael Crichton fan. Also, Primal Terror.
Both of them are in my notes.
Yeah. So like those were like two of my first like early influences. So yeah, that's funny that you definitely picked up on that.
Well, it's funny because Sharkwater Beach from the outside looks like it's kind of not based on, but influenced by Jaws. But in reality, it's more the Beast in structure.
Yeah, The Beast was definitely an influence. Also, his book Creature. Well, actually, it was White Shark. It was published as White Shark, and I think it became Creature later. And I think they did like
they adapted it and they retitled it, right?
Yeah, they did like a really bad made for TV movie with it was Craig T. Nelson in that, I think, and Kim Cattrall, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, they relabeled it or retitled it Creature. But yeah, that was like a big one too for me. I just remember getting that book out of the library like every summer and reading it. And growing up on the Jersey Shore, it was just I've read a lot of like aquatic themed books, and Peter Benchley was that guy. So
see, it's so interesting because you're from the other side of Jersey. Like we're a state away from each other, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I'm up in the northern western edge, and you were at least down by the peninsula.
Yeah, I still live on the Jersey Shore, so we're actually not too far away then. If you're still in Jersey,
I still am. Of course, work can send me anywhere, but for right now, and for the last 2 years, I've been pretty stably in Jersey. But it's funny because I kind of had the same experience growing up with the original Friday the 13th. Is that it looked right? The movie looked right. It felt right. Those characters seemed like people I could know, and I really connected more so than the original Halloween. and it was impossible for a long time for people to understand. And then one day I walked out back and I was like, it just looks right. That's what it is. Look at the film. Find out the film was made 20 minutes from my house. Well, of course it looks right.
Yeah, you're just familiar with it.
So Jaws was based on of course, Matawan shark attacks.
Yeah, it was. And again, I'm not like that familiar with like the whole story. But yeah, it was based on shark attacks that happened in New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore. And yeah, I love that book. I really love the movie more. Like it's one of those few movies that are substantially better than the book. That doesn't happen too often, but that's like one movie I could just put on over and over again and just watch it on a repeat, which I've done.
I love Jaws. And I completely acknowledge its brilliance, but I was always a Jaws 2 guy.
Really?
Yeah.
And it's great too.
I get it for everyone. It's not as good a film. I agree with you, but for whatever reason, I connect with that movie. I love the characters. I love how it's a body count thriller.
Yeah.
And it abandons pretense of kind of the Moby Dick thing gets abandoned in the first scene, and they go, no, we're making a teenage slasher film with a shark.
Exactly. Yeah, no, Jaws 2 is great. And honestly, like, I'm probably going to get beat up for this, but I love Jaws 3, even though it's not a great movie in comparison to the first two, but it has its place in my heart.
Yeah, well, like I always say, we should embrace the phrase guilty pleasure, because you can get real pleasure out of things that you know aren't good.
Yeah, exactly. I have a lot, as you'll come to find out probably, I have a lot of guilty pleasure movies.
Okay, so they're infatuated with your hat in the chat. So I'm just going to bring up Christian's question here as where did you get the hat?
You know, I got this hat at a convention. I think I got it at Scares That Care. Just somebody was selling horror themed hats, and I don't know, just I love Nightmare on Elm Street, so that was my choice.
Down in Virginia Beach, was it one of the early years?
I think it was like last year. I've gone there for the past 4 years, so it was either the last one or the one before it. So
yeah, I did a reading at the first one, but I haven't been back since, because that 9-hour drive or whatever it is
it's brutal. Yeah, it is brutal. It's like a 6.5 hour for me. But yeah,
you're about 3 hours from me, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I-95 is just a brutal road to drive down, and it is the work. Like actually last year, I like I said, I'd done it the past 4 years. I have a blast every single time I go down there. But yeah, last year after the drive home, I was like, I don't think I could do this again. So I'm going to take a break next year. And then COVID happened. So
no choice.
It was no brainer there. And they didn't even have the convention this year. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think next year is going to be, it's tough for me because I have like a few books coming out that I really want to get down there to promote. And it's such a great convention for authors to attend. Because you sell a lot of books, a lot of readers go there. They get a lot of big name authors there. So it definitely attracts a good crowd. It's just, I don't know if I'm going to have it in me next year to make that drive.
I'm hoping there's a backstory to this question I see in the chat, but I'm going to put it up anyway.
I'm sure there has to be.
I'm hoping. Question for Tim. How could someone who writes things so scary be oh so pretty?
Yeah, Frank's a good friend. He's also a Jersey guy. So he lives in like the middle of New Jersey. So like where I'm south and you're north, he lives like right in between.
He's like living on Route 1, that kind of thing.
He's in like I don't even forget the name of the town. I don't want to tell people where.
No, don't do that. We're not going to dox anyone on the show.
They're gonna show up at his house and I don't know, tickle him or something. No, he's a fun guy, Frank Edler. He's a really good Bizarro author. So if you guys get a chance, if you're into Bizarro, definitely check his stuff out. But yeah, they make fun of me because they're all ugly and I'm better looking than them, so they get really jealous.
I know, isn't that just the craziest thing?
It's crazy.
Yeah. So let's start at the beginning. How did you originally get bit by the horror bug?
By the horror bug? Man, I honestly, Jaws is one of the first movies that I can remember watching and just being fascinated with that film from like a really young age. I had to be like 6 or 7 watching that movie. and it just kind of stuck with me. And again, going back to the whole Jersey Shore thing, like I could not go in the water for like 2 summers. So that kind of like got the horror bug started, and then I kind of just became like fascinated. I saw The Exorcist really early on. Again, Michael Crichton was like a huge influence. So like Jurassic Park was big for me because that movie came out when I was like 9, and like by that time I was just kind of obsessed with horror. And Goosebumps, like I was a huge Goosebumps fan, so I grew up in that era. And yeah, I devoured those books and all of R.L. Stein's books, and a combination of like those films and those books kind of got me started.
So we're not who we were as kids, although a lot of the love that started as children just remains.
Yeah.
Is there a type of fiction you find yourself gravitating towards, both writing and consuming?
Besides horror, I've been getting into like fantasy lately, just as a reader, and I've dabbled in it, like writing, but usually, when I do anytime I try to deviate from horror, I always kind of get sucked back in. 4 years ago, I tried to write a straight thriller with no like horror or supernatural elements in it whatsoever, because thrillers sell a lot better than horror novels do.
Easy to get representation, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I tried a hand at it, and it didn't work out because it got kind of weird and crazy. And the end result ended up being a novel I wrote called Dead Daughters, which is being released later this year through Silver Shamrock Publishing. And yeah, I always try to like mix it up because I am a fan of so many different genres. Like I love reading thrillers, I love fantasy, I love science fiction, I love all these different genres. But when it comes to writing them, I always try to deviate, and then something happens, horror just kind of sucks me right back in. So yeah, I mean, I would love to write like a straight fantasy novel, but it'll probably never happen at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I tried to do something similar, and I did manage to sell the story, but it was like a slog. It was called Dragons in the Dust Bowl, and it was exactly what it sounds like. It was set during the Dust Bowl, and the idea that as the winds picked up and the soil was in the air, there was dragons in the soil, which sounds like a horror story, but it wasn't. It was a fantasy story.
Yeah.
But man, it's not my strong suit. That's what I learned very quickly.
Yeah, it's a tough genre to write because there's a lot of element, and I actually started writing a fantasy novel, but it got too big and too away from me. Yeah, fantasy is just a crazy genre.
So, of the books that you've released, and if you had to have someone pick one as their introduction to your work, which I'm sure I started in the wrong places, but where would you send them?
Honestly, it's tough because I do try to, write across the horror genre. I don't just stick with one subgenre. Like I don't just do haunted house stories or ghost stories or, dinosaur horror. I kind of all over the map. So it's hard to pick just one, but if I had to, I'll cheat. I'll pick two if you don't mind.
Mhm.
I'll do the short story collection just because it is I think short stories or collections are a good sample of a writer's work. And you kind of get a little bit of everything. So Black Star Constellations, which is my collection, has a lot of different things in it, a lot of different subgenres in it that people can hopefully appreciate. And then for like a novel or a novella length, I'd probably go The Switch House because it's one of my favorite things that I've written, and people really really seem to enjoy that. And that's kind of like a good example of my style. And it's short too. It's only about 40,000 words, so you can read it fairly quickly too, which I think is also a good thing to be introduced to a new author's work, is to read something shorter, so you're not committing yourself to like a huge 90 100,000 word novel in case you don't connect with it.
Yeah, I remember when Mark Danielowski's House of Leaves came out,
Oof.
and so many people were rushing towards it. And I'm like, you guys might want to do a little research first.
Yeah.
I love it, but I'm not so sure all you're really going to dig.
Yeah, that's a wild book. I actually read it for the first time 2 years ago, and yeah, that's very interesting, that book. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
Well, you know what's craziest about that book? If you take out everything that people talk about the book, you know, the colored letters or the footnotes that become their own story or the upside down text, you take all that out, the story still works.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The was it the Davidson account? Like that whole story is it's just really fun. And then even like all the letters and stuff are great too. I don't know. I really enjoyed it for what it was. I know a lot of people get caught up in all that the formatting and just the structure of it, but it's really an entertaining book.
Yeah. And you take that with his sister's album, and it's
Yeah.
an amazing experience.
Poe, right?
Yep. Haunted. Yeah. Haunted is also one of the best albums of the decade it came out in. So
I love that album. I actually write to that album a lot. I'm like a musical person, so like I have to write to music, and that's in my rotation. So
yeah, we have that disease. Yeah, no, I write to music as well. When I hear people say, "Oh, I can't," or "I can only do the classical or jazz because the lyrics," no, not at all. I can tune that out. It's just a crutch I use to get to a certain place.
Yeah,
and maybe that's cheating a bit, but I don't care. I cheat. I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really listen to new music because I do get distracted, especially if it's like a band or an artist that I really like. That can get distracting because I'm just like too into it. But things that I've heard a bunch of times before, or like I like to listen to death metal a lot when I'm writing, because I don't really get distracted by anything. It's just kind of there in the background. Or like ambient stuff. Like I listen to a lot of like ambient kind of dubstep, like almost techno, but I don't know if anybody knows what dubstep is.
Everyone knows what dubs. Well, they should.
They should, but I don't know.
I find myself a lot of experimental 80s punk rock stuff, like Missions of Burma is just like my sweet spot for writing, because it's weird. It puts me in a place, but it's also kind of the more intellectual tip, so that you can kind of like you stir up that in you, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I also have, especially when I was writing Blue Eel, different characters had different soundtracks. They literally had music I put in to get myself in the headspace of that character in this go.
Yeah,
and that worked. It worked for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like soundtracks, like film soundtracks too, are really great to listen to. One I listen to a lot. It's not even a horror movie, but The Fountain. Love that soundtrack. That's like one of my favorite soundtracks ever, and that's constantly in my rotation. Okay,
we're going to catch up with a few things in the chat that you need to see. Tim says, "I got Switch House."
Nice.
Al's looking to get hurt. There we go. And Frank says, "Limbs is his favorite of yours."
That's cool. Yeah, that's another personal favorite of mine. I really enjoyed writing that one.
And I'm not gonna put it on screen, but thank you, Jacob. That's very nice of you. Let's talk about my writing, not yours. So we're gonna keep that off the page.
Hey, we could celebrate your writing, man.
Oh no, we don't want to do that every time I do a show. That would get old for everyone, especially me. Links in the description, guys. So what I found really fascinating reading Sharkwater Beach is that you had these very, very, very segmented scenes. Like your scenes had beginnings, middles, and ends to them. They were very cogent, especially in the first half. Every scene had its point. It had what it wanted to accomplish, and it clearly accomplished it. And that's why I said it feels very filmic, because in film you don't have really the real estate to spend just wandering around finding yourself. And many novels, especially less successful novels, feel exactly that way. Whereas it feels like we're detailing a person's day because we're going to eventually figure out what's important in the chapter. You don't have that problem. You definitely start and end chapters where they need to start and end. and in the middle is the meat.
Yeah, I definitely tend to write a little bit leaner. And again, going back to like the cinematic aspect. I mean, I grew up as a big film lover. I'd always wanted to be like a screenwriter first, so I had taken some screenwriting classes and courses, and I just been studying film and screenwriting forever. So that's probably where that kind of comes from. And I think that novel in particular was pretty plotted out prior to me writing it. So that's also probably why it's a little bit more, it doesn't wander as much, because I had like a strict guideline. I feel like when I don't outline, that can tend to happen where I just, you get a lot of like rambling on about stuff that doesn't really matter, that doesn't serve any purpose to the story. And I like some of that writing too. Like a lot of people think Stephen King does that a lot, where he just rambles on for chapters and chapters about stuff that's not important to the story. But I don't know, that guy's writing is the best, I think, that there ever was. So I could listen to him describe a doorknob for 2 pages, and it's the best. So
Well, he says, too bad you're not a fan of Anne Rice, because she would give you 5 pages about that doorknob.
yeah,
Um,
I do like some of Anne Rice's stuff. I've enjoyed.
I've said this a million times on this channel, but I Interview with the Vampire when it came out. Well, not when it came out. When I discovered it, which was a couple years after it came out.
Yeah,
I enjoyed quite a lot. And then I remember Twilight Zone magazine ran an excerpt of Vampire Lestat before it came out, and it turned me off so quickly. I'm like, Rockstar, really? So I mean, I really haven't investigated Anne Rice as much as I probably should, but I also feel it's probably not my thing.
Yeah, it's fair.
But Steve King, of course, the first 15 years or so, I think, are just golden. I think today I don't pick up everything King puts out, but then again, I'm so investigating so many other newer voices. It's just, for some people, it's a comfort food. For me, I don't look at it that way. I look at it as like, this, for me, someone like Brian Hodge is more like I have to read everything he puts out. But to me, I'm always kind of like being diverted by the hot new girl, if you say, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so it's like what it is.
That happens. You get like distracted by all this new stuff that's coming out that you haven't seen before.
Absolutely. So this is going to push you in the middle of a conversation that's been happening for quite a while on this channel. So I apologize for that.
No worries.
But they specifically want to know your take on it. Have you read any of the Del Abyss books?
The Del Abyss books? No, I don't think I have.
Okay. Well, you have some homework, sir.
Yeah. I wish I could contribute to this conversation. It sounds interesting.
Well, I firmly believe this, but I've kind of found an audience that kind of shares a lot of the belief that Del Abyss was the finest, most creative moment in commercial horror publishing. Janine Cavallo's really put out this line that it launched a lot of great writers, but it did something more important, which was it took the handlebars off and said, go where you're going to go. I'm not going to steer you. Go. And that's how we launch Brian Hodge and Kathy Koja. And that's how we get people like Rick Reed. We get these people who are willing to take big, adventurous leaps in a time when everyone was kind of just trying to follow the Stephen King, Robert McCamm, and John Saul path. Yeah. And then there was this graduating class of young talent that was just allowed to just go crazy. And they did. And while some of the books later in the line are not as successful, there's still that spirit to some degree.
You mentioned Kathy Koja. I'm actually, I'm listening to it on audiobook, The Cipher.
Cipher's amazing.
It's so good. I love it. I only have like an hour and a half left, and it's, I love it.
Unlike anything else out there, right?
Yeah, it really is. It's really good. Like I want a film adaptation of that. Like, yeah,
but Cronenberg's too old now.
Oh yeah, that is true. That would be a perfect Cronenberg movie.
When I pitched that to her after we got done with our conversation on the show, and afterwards I'm like, Cronenberg in his prime doing Cipher, and she goes, I don't know.
Oh man, that would have been perfect.
I think so. I think, or David Lynch, but I think Lynch wants to do his own thing.
Yeah, no, but definitely Cronenberg. I could totally see that
Yeah,
with the
definitely.
hand. Yeah, like that would be amazing.
Oh, it's amazing. Um, there is also I missed it. I'll find it. I'll find it later. So we talked about King.
Hmm.
Were there other early influences that you read everything at the time? Um,
Yeah, so right after King, I mean, I kind of did what you did. I mean, there's only so much King you can read, right? So I went out and I explored some other authors. Robert McCammon was really big because he was kind of like, I guess, like the next one down, I guess, at the time. And I remember reading Wolf's Hour and just being like blown away by not only just the concept, like a werewolf fighting Nazis, um, but just the way it was written, it was so well constructed and structured, and just the language and how everything flowed. Like I was really into Robert McCammon's writing, and so I picked like five different novels from McCammon, and I read them all, and he just kind of became an instant favorite for me. Same thing with Barker. Like I got into Barker for a while. Like Books of Blood were a pretty big influence. And then later, like probably in 2004, 2005, the leisure books, like the leisure line, I got really into that. A lot of Brian Keene stuff, and like Jack Ketchum, like those guys I started reading. And yeah, so that's kind of like the middle, like after I graduated from like Crichton and Peter Benchley, a lot of like the popular like thriller horror writers. I uh I got more into like the horror fiction.
Absolutely. So you mentioned short stories before, and you actually suggested that might be a place to start with you.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's interesting because you actually mentioned also that you also think that novellas are kind of a good place to start with any author,
Hmm.
and I agree with that. But the weird thing is, the sales on a national level don't follow that trend. Like you would think at a time when the attention span is where it is, where that instant Netflix and get the next episode on is so popular that short stories and novellas would be exactly the center of publishing now.
Yeah,
But they're not.
no, it's weird. Novels are like the only, I mean, in my experience, to what you're saying, yeah, it's accurate. Novels just sell better. But I don't know. I love the novella. Like it's one of my favorite forms of fiction, and I would love for there to be like this big surge in novellas because I think they're like the perfect length. You can read them a lot of cases, in an afternoon, or like 2 days, and they're just as impactful as novels. Like you still get like a good story, a lot of words and description in there, and yeah, I would love to see the novellas make like I would like to say a return, but they've never really been like a
Never
big.
had their Haley.
They never really had their fair share. So yeah, I don't know. I like novella is like my favorite form actually. A lot of my stuff is like novella length, I guess. It depends on who you ask. There's like this gray area after like 40,000 words until you get to about like 60,000 words where it's like, is it a novel or is it a novella? I was having this conversation with someone today actually, and it's like, where's the line? There is no line. And
Yeah, I remember there being this same conversation 25 years ago. Where does a novelette end and a novella begin? Well, you know what? Who cares?
yeah.
Honestly, is the story the length it needs to be?
Exactly, and that's why like the Switch House and another short, I call them short novels because I don't really like calling them novellas when they're like 50,000 words,
Yeah.
So yeah, 69 is another one where it's like 53,000 words. Limbs is like 55,000 words, might be closer to 60. So yeah, they're just like short novels, and I think that's like a good length. You read it in a couple days, and then you're done. You're on to something else.
And we've just fallen trap to the writer's curse because word count means nothing to readers.
Yeah, exactly.
So everyone just divide by 250 and you'll be fine. That's the number of pages.
Yeah, like 200 pages. What is that? Is that a novel? Is it a novella? We don't know.
Yeah,
It's
and
it's a
I think
story.
you're right, though. I think that should be the sweet spot for most writers, and it should help people find new stuff. The thing I find kind of obnoxious is that we can't seem to find a pricing structure to support it. Because
Yeah.
if you could buy a physical book that was a novella for $5, we'd be off to the races, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just I guess that's just because like printing costs are so expensive, and it's yeah, you're right because there's no way you can price like a novella for $5 on Amazon or even if they were available in like Barnes and Noble and stuff, publishers aren't gonna yeah
Yeah, you're still looking at $12 no matter what you're doing. And at
exactly
that point, you're looking at the novel for the same price, close to it. And you're
yeah
saying, well, why would I? Maybe that's part of what's holding it back, which is unfortunate because it should be the quality of the experience, not the number of pages.
yeah I agree with that. Yeah, it's tough because people look at even like ebooks now, right? Like most of them are priced like $4 or $5, and then what do you price a novella at? Like $3, and then it's like, oh, for an extra dollar I can get double the story. So yeah, you're right. It's pricing's like is weird for novellas.
But even before the electronic revolution, I mean, there was still this belief out there that short stories should be the center of the universe. Now, for me, growing up, they were. Like
Yeah,
the Shadows anthologies that Charles L. Grant put out were my life. More than King, it's why I wanted to be a writer. Is I read all these writers. Like I remember reading Melanie Tem for the first time and being like, oh, you can do that. That's a real thing. You can create something that no one else would ever dream of. And not that Stephen King or Robert McCammon or anyone else wasn't creating their own thing. But there was something about the creativity of those short stories at that time that really was, to me, way out there, further out than fantasy or science fiction could ever go. And it really broadened my horizons. Every video I make starts with a description, a definition of horror. For a long time, it bothered me. I couldn't define the genre I worked in.
yeah,
So until I sat down and said, no, I'm going to figure this out. And I think I came close. It might not be perfect, but I think I came real close when I realized it was about the effect on the person reading. It wasn't about anything that was contained in the story necessarily. It's how it makes people feel.
right.
And that changed my mind. And I don't think any other genre could have possibly done that. And I don't think I would have had the patience to read enough novels to get the horror bug at what, 11 years old.
Yeah,
So I'm very thankful for the short story. I don't write many of them anymore, but I'm very thankful. I think that is a form that needs to take off, and I think novella needs to be central. Central.
no, I agree. Yeah, short stories are great. I think from a writing standpoint, it's obviously a lot more difficult because you're restricted, right, with the amount of words you can use. So your stories are not necessarily smaller, but you just have to be more choosy with how you tell the story, and I think that can be difficult. I know, like I've struggled with it as a writer. Trying to write like a big story but condense it down into like something very short. It's definitely its own animal. I don't think everyone who's like a really good novelist can write short stories well, and I don't think a lot of short story writers can write novels well. I think they're kind of like their own thing.
I agree with that. I think that it's a different skill set, and it's something you can focus on and get good at, just like anything. Because
Yeah,
I mean, that's the other thing. I have a big problem with the idea of talent from God type thing. I think that you get interested in doing something, and then you say, okay, I'm going to tear it apart and figure out how to do this because I want to do it.
yeah,
And you learn the hard skills. The imagination, that's a different issue. But even imagination, I think, can be learned to a degree if you just learn to flip the switch.
yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, imaginations. I mean, everybody has an imagination, right? People will tell you that they don't, but they do, and it's just how they draw that out of themselves is how you work on it, I guess, like how you put it.
So let's talk movies for just a little bit because you are wearing a Nightmare on Elm Street hat in front of an Army of Darkness poster.
Yeah.
And obviously I have a big Friday 13th and Game Over poster behind me.
There you go.
So obviously it's in our wheelhouse as well. And I don't mean to distract from the writing side of it, but when we talk this stuff, we'll always have more people who've seen Army of Darkness or Friday the 13th than have read all the novels that we're going to talk about.
Right.
So
That is true.
Yeah. So as much as I'd love to just talk books the whole time, I think it might be healthy to talk about film for just a little bit.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite horror films?
So I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street, obviously that was a big one. The Thing is probably my favorite, although it changes quite often. I was a big Carpenter. I'm still a huge Carpenter fan. In the Mouth of Madness is like definitely in my top 5. Newer stuff like Hereditary blows my mind. I love that film. I could watch it. I've probably seen it about 5 or 6 times, and like every time I watch it, it's like I've never watched the movie before because I'm finding out so many different little hidden Easter eggs in it, and that's such a great movie. Another one I was actually talking about earlier today with someone, The Descent. It's kind of, I guess, newer. I think it's over 10 years old by now, but that one is like such a great film. I mean, there's so many. I could go on and on for 2 hours about all my favorite horror films, but those are like the big ones for me right now. And like I said, the list is always changing. Like I always see something, or I'll remember something later and be like, oh yeah, why didn't I throw that one in my top 3 or 5 because it's so good,
Are you a theater guy or are you a home viewing guy?
Oh, I'm a theater guy. It's killing me that I can't go to the movies right now. I mean, I can, but
so I mean, I'm not, without giving away where you are, there is a drive-in. The only working drive-in shouldn't be that far from you in Jersey.
Yeah, I haven't been there though. It's hard because my wife and I, we have a 5-year-old, so it's hard, and he has autism, so it's hard for him to go to a lot of these places, and we haven't even brought him to a movie theater yet for that experience. So like we're itching to get him like there. But yeah, like I definitely want to go because I've heard good things. There's a few in our area, not close. I mean, they're like a couple hours away. But that's still kind of close, I guess, when you have nothing else to do because you're quarantined.
I was so lucky because I have I'm close enough to Pennsylvania that I have 3 drive-ins within like an hour and a half of me.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I went out and saw Relic on the big screen.
Oh, nice.
It's the best film of this year, in my opinion. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
And I realize how horrible it is if you don't have a drive-in near you. There was the first place you saw this film was on whatever screen you saw it at home. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing for certain people, but I just like films being experienced how they're meant to be seen.
Oh, totally. I'm with you, man. I worked at a movie theater for like 6 years in like high school and in college. And I love the movie theater experience. I was a projectionist, so I got to like watch all the movies from the projection booth and like.
Did you have to platter up the prints?
Yep.
Did you break them down?
Yeah,
to destroy the heads and tails like every good projectionist does?
No, of course not.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding about the last part of it. I never had that job. I should have had that job.
Oh, it's honestly it's one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. Just being so close to the films and the prints, and being able to thread the projector, and just like building, because like you mentioned, they had like a platter system, and you'd have to take all the reels. So there was like 5 or 6 reels, sometimes 7 or 8, depending on how long the movie is. Each reel's like about 20 minutes long, and you have to like build the prints so it's one giant print, and then put it on this giant platter and feed it through the projector. And it was just cool, man. It was just like a cool experience. And I wish now they don't even have projectionists. Now it's all digital.
They push a button in the lobby.
Yeah, it's crazy. So I got out like just right about when like their digital projectors were kind of just dominating. So, but it's always my dream to open up like a little 2-theater projection, or a movie theater, a little 2-theater place, maybe one day. maybe combine that with a brewery, like so I have like a brewery and a movie theater together. That would be like the best.
Booze and brews.
There you go.
There you go. Jess Graham asks a question for both Tim and Lauren. Of your novels/stories, which is the one or two that you'd most love to see adapted to film?
That's a great question. So, it's hard. I think the Switch House would probably, again, just because it's a personal favorite of mine. I think that would probably be like the best to adapt. Because, like you said, I think I write very cinematically, and I think that one's probably it'd be the coolest one to see on screen. And it has like kind of like a Hereditary-esque vibe and to it. So I would like that one to actually. There's actually a script for it, but I don't know if it'll ever get made. So, and then maybe like Limbs, because again, that's another one that's kind of like this cool. Like for me personally, there's like a lot of like cool hidden stuff in there that I enjoy, and it's horror, but it's also like a comedy, and I'm a big fan of comedy, so I think that would be a cool one to see as well.
If I'm being smart, I'm saying Snarl, because it would be the most commercially in touch or relevant to the current horror movie population. I mean, it's a werewolf chase film. It's basically Mad Max Fury Road meets The Howling. I mean, it's a chase with werewolves. So I think that would be easy to get your hooks into viewers with.
Yeah.
But I don't write traditional monsters anymore, so because I never intended to. That just is a thing that a publisher wanted me to do, so I did for 4.5 years. Bleak December would be with the film I'd love to see made, but it's impossible without major changes, simply because the content is just not acceptable for movie screens.
Yeah, and that's the other hard thing too about picking what books to become movies, because some books just don't make good movies, and they need to be changed so much that it kind of loses a little bit of what you had intended as the writer of the novel or short story or whatever. So yeah, it's tough. It's a tough thing, adaptations.
So do you see yourself as actively pursuing making screenplays of your stories or original screenplays? Do you see that as something in your future?
Yeah, I mean, I've done it with the Switch House. I just when I was quarantined earlier this year, not doing anything, I decided to take a stab at writing a screenplay for the Switch House, and I thought it came out pretty good. I actually entered it in a contest that Screencraft, I think, is the name of the company that runs this horror contest every year, and it made it to the semifinals. So
that's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience.
First time you wrote something in the format and you're getting into finals of anything is.
Yeah. I was definitely blown away by the reception and the judges' scores that I received for it. So yeah, I was excited. I don't know if anything will ever happen to it, but yeah, I mean, it's hard to like adapt your own stuff because you want it to be so close to the source material, and sometimes I think it's almost better if somebody else just takes it and does like their own thing with it, because you're just too close to it as a writer. It's the same thing as why I mean, you definitely need to have editors and multiple editors look at your stuff, because you're too close to it, and you can't like make your own decisions on some things sometimes.
The problem is what you meant to say.
Yeah.
And so to you, it's that thing already. It just is. Yeah. No, I've had great experiences with editors. I had one really bad experience with an editor, but even that, I'm glad I went through now. If you would have asked me at the time, I'd be no. But no, I think getting all their eyes on. I also think, though, there's something to be said about things exist in the form they exist for a reason.
Right.
So you ever get really frustrated when you get that one friend that talks to you about how they changed everything from that comic book when they made it into a movie?
Yeah.
And you just want to shake them and go, because they made a movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's
It
like a
makes the comic book.
totally different format, and you have to like understand. That's why like I can understand why I like some writers get hurt by that, and they're like, oh, they took my book and they ruined it, or they took my comic book and ruined it, which I guess I can understand. But I mean, at the same time, you wrote your book, like you said what you wanted to say in it. Someone else is just giving you a paycheck to turn into a different art form,
That's a
and
no-lose situation for you.
yeah. So I don't know. If long story short, if anybody wants to butcher any of my books and turn them into a film, they're available.
Yeah, I hear you. I also think it's to give you an idea that the perspective is so wonky for us as creators. It's like the fact that Stephen King hates The Shining, the
Yeah.
Kubrick film, but he loves that miniseries.
I'm actually the same way.
Really?
This might become like a whole big thing, but yeah, I do enjoy the miniseries, and I mean, I like Kubrick's film for like what it's an intense movie. It's like a white knuckle thriller, and it is a good movie, but as an adaptation and as a huge fan of that novel, like I'm not like a huge fan of it. And it has like there's some other issues with it that I like. I watched it recently, and I just remember like kind of picking at it a little bit. And I'm not gonna go into it because we could spend 2 hours talking about it. But yeah, I don't know. Like I also like Mick Garris's stuff, and I enjoy that adaptation. I think Steven Weber is like one of the most underrated actors of like all time. Like I feel like that guy should just be in every single movie as some character because he's just
Mick Garris apparently agrees. So
yeah, I know because he's awesome. Love him. Wings, classic.
I don't think I've ever seen an episode of Wings.
No,
I don't watch. I have like I don't have a funny bone apparently, and I get made fun of for this. But I can't do comedies. I just stare at the screen and I don't understand what's going on. It's not good. So we have a question from Jacob, just for you, not for me. Who is your favorite horror character in general, and who is your favorite horror character that you've written?
Oh man, that is a good question. Favorite horror character ever? Ugh. I mean, are we talking about villain, or are we talking about
You said horror character? I don't know.
horror character? I guess that means villain. I mean, for books, oh man, I'll take the easy way out. I'll go Pennywise from It, just because it's like one of my favorite horror novels ever, and just having a villain that's literally fear for a horror novel is just really awesome. And yeah, I love it. And if I had to pick like just a regular character, like Bill Denborough is probably one of my favorite characters from that book. For movies, favorite villain's got to be Freddy Krueger, right?
Well, not for me, but
well, for me it is.
I love the first film, and that's where I stop.
Oh, really? See, I love almost all of them.
Christian, where are you? I think I found a life mate for you.
I love them. Oh man, they're so great. And then one that I've written, geez, can I say from a book that's not even out yet? Is that allowed?
Well, if it's your favorite, yeah, man. This is about you. This isn't about them.
Well, I have a big book coming out next June, from Silver Shamrock Publishing, and it's called Malignant Summer. It's for word count people. It's 200,000 words, so it's a pretty big one.
Yeah, you aren't going to end up with a publisher who decides on like 7-point font, right? I mean,
no, I don't think so. I think I don't know. We haven't worked out those details yet.
Be careful there, sir. Make sure that's in the contract. Otherwise, you're going to be talking like Brian Hodges about Dark Advent.
Oh, geez, no. Yeah, I don't think they would do that to me. They put out Todd Kieslin's Devil's Creek, and that's a pretty big novel. I think that one's like 170 or 180,000
I just
words.
brought that downstairs. I could have just flashed that on screen.
Yeah,
Damn it.
that's the same publisher, and that book looks really good, and it read very well. So I don't have any. I've got no issues. I think they're gonna do a great job with it. But yeah, my main character from that book, Doug Sims, is probably my favorite character, just because it's like me as a kid. It's a coming of age story, and yeah, there's just a lot of him in me, and he was very fun and easy to write, obviously. And then the villain from that book, which I don't really want to say too much about because I don't want to give it away, but the villain is pretty cool. So I'll just leave it at that.
So I'm going to answer it even though it wasn't for me. Definitely Mary Cat from We've Always Lived in the Castle, the Shirley Jackson novel. Just the most bizarre, wonderful, lovable, hateable character ever in literature. Just layers upon layers of character. And she's awesome. And I still haven't seen the film adaptation. And I know people can just yell at me because I love the cast. I love the original novel. And I'm terrified they'll screw it up. So I'm not going to watch the movie anytime soon. For my character, actually, my current writing project, too, so it's not published yet, is a character named Kelsabeth. And her whole thing is she runs a company that solves impossible problems. And whether they're legal or not, she solves impossible problems.
I'm intrigued.
And, the thing I love about her is that she's super smart and super capable because she's had all these adventures before the book begins. But she's also kind of paranoid because she knows too much about the world. And I love that because I love having a character that's really strong, but they have this glaring flaw, not just a flaw, like a glaring flaw. I like writing those characters and still making them sympathetic, but you root for them despite the fact that they might be annoying as hell if you knew them in real life. I think that's just fun for me.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Did you do this? You see, he talked about liking all the Nightmare films, so now there's comments there.
Oh God.
So it seems a lot of hate for Dream Child is happening right now.
Yeah, I mean Dream Child.
Freddy's Dead's worse, so whatever.
Dream Warriors, though. I mean, that movie I love that movie. I could watch Dream Warriors and the soundtrack.
See, we should avoid this. That's the film that broke me on the series. Like the second film was a big step down, but I kind of liked it. And as a kid, I liked it more than I should have.
Yeah.
Dream Warriors, I was sitting in the theater getting more and more annoyed. Just the big dumb special effects were just so distant from the first film's shadowy scariness. It was all it was all Johnny Depp's bed explosion. That whole movie is just that level of thing. And I was just like, can we just have like the scary guy in the shadows whispering really creepy things that we don't quite understand the context of? Because that was the scary stuff.
Yeah.
I guess for the people who wanted horror comedies, the Nightmare series worked great.
Yeah.
I didn't want a horror comedy series out of it. I wanted that first film's darkness.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, it gets lighter, obviously, as it goes on. But
campier. I like some metal, yeah, but I'm more on the Guns N' Roses side than the Dokken side of the musical spectrum.
I don't know.
I'm like more of a punk and industrial guy anyway, so maybe it's just not for me.
No, probably not, but I don't know. I love it.
Are you a Friday fan? Because it's inevitable now that if you're talking Nightmare, that's going to come up.
Yeah, I like it. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of it.
Cool. So I think that's an interesting distinction because I think it was my generation that might have been the turning point because you're a generation under me. And I think that before me, writers just were not supposed to appreciate horror films in general. Stuff like The Exorcist because Blatty, I mean, that's different. Or Ira Levine's adaptations of Rosemary's Baby. That was different. It was based on a novel that was high profile. You were allowed to like it, but the sludge of the genre you weren't supposed to accept or like.
Right.
And then really my generation, the people who came of age in the 90s were suddenly saying, no, you know what? I'm a big Friday the 13th fan and I'm going to write novels. They're not going to be Friday the 13th novels. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But we can love that stuff. It's okay. book, because it seems like especially in the 80s, that Skip and Spectre really broke that door down when they
Yeah.
published Book of the Dead, the short story collection that was not legally but clearly based on George Romero's Dead's films. And I think after that point, it opened up a lot. And now you have a generation of writers who are able to say, yeah, I like dumb slasher films from the early 80s. And I like Nightmare on Elm Street part 6. I like it. It's okay to say that.
Yep.
Whereas it wasn't just a generation ago. And I think that's a healthy thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I like you said before, guilty pleasure movies, like you shouldn't feel that guilty about liking that stuff. You should just like whatever, makes you feel happy and warm and fuzzy on the inside. And if Nightmare 6 does that for you, then amazing.
Maybe seek some help, but yeah, that's amazing.
If you own the Dream Warrior soundtrack, there's nothing wrong with that, right? On vinyl, there's nothing wrong with that.
There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. No, I mean the fourth film does have Blondie on it, right?
That's true.
It always blew my mind, like who they thought those soundtracks were really for.
Yeah.
It's like, because it would be like, and the last two tracks were always like parts of the score on all those soundtracks, and you're like, let's face it, the people buying it for Dokken didn't care.
That's true.
Don't do it. My favorite soundtrack for a horror film of all time is Return of the Living Dead.
Okay.
And the last track on that is part of the score, and it's great. I love it, but it's like it stopped there from being an actual score pressed.
Yeah.
So I hate it for that reason, because I want both. I don't know. So at this point in your career, you've published a decent amount of novels. You have definitely gotten your following building, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do the conventions where you're directly getting FaceTime with your readership. Online is opened up, which is something, again, an entire generation of writers didn't have. What are your ultimate goals? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do with this thing?
I mean, ultimately, I would just be able to write full time. I think that would be like a good goal. As of right now, I have a day job. But I think being able to write full time would be a goal. I don't need a lot of money or anything. I just want to be able to enjoy myself and be able to tell stories on a full time basis, so I could quit my day job. That'd be amazing. But if it doesn't happen, I'm also kind of satisfied where I am, because I mean, I don't, I just write whatever I want to write. I don't have to worry about paying bills or anything with my writing. I don't have to do ghostwriting or anything. I'm kind of just like free. Anything I want to, I can write. And I think that's kind of like an important thing too, is just being able, because a lot of writers I've talked to a lot of writers who write full time, and they don't always get to choose what they write. I mean, they have to put food on, they have to feed their families, they have to pay rent or a mortgage, and they need to do whatever it takes to do that. And I feel like if I was in that position as well, like I feel like a lot of my creativity would maybe take a hit. So I also kind of like where I am right now, just being able to just write and just have fun with it. And because for me, it's mostly about just telling good stories and entertaining people. That's what it is for me, than it is about money or anything else. But just being able to write full time, I think, would be a cool thing. But I want to do it on my own terms, not have to sell myself.
Isn't it amazing to think that long after we're dead, there's going to be copies of our books just floating out there, and some 12-year-old kid is going to pick us up and read our thoughts in 150 years.
Yeah, that is weird. I mean, I hope that still happens. I hope that happens.
As long as there's a planet and as long as there's still kids, I think we're pretty safe.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's a crazy thing to think about, like, because your words, they'll live on forever.
And that's the crazy thing, like the collaborative arts of like film and music. It's true of those two, but it's so much less personal. Every word, every constructed scene, every idea.
Yeah.
That's the real reward, I think. More than anything else. I mean, I love when people just say really nice things like they've said in the chat tonight, or when they do it in person to me. I love that.
Yeah.
It makes me feel good. But the idea that people that I'll have no possible way to ever meet, I will meet.
Yeah.
It's just sort of amazing to me. And that's that when I get down about things, and I get down, I mean, I have that kind of personality. That's really the easiest way to get me out, is just to start thinking about the fact that we're putting things out there that will survive.
Yeah. But that's true. It's something crazy to think about, for sure.
The real ghosts are the words in a book, man. That's what it's about.
That is true.
So, Tim, before we start to wrap up here, can you do me a big favor?
Yeah, what's up?
Can you ask me what's coming up next on the show?
Sure. So, what's coming up next on the old show? What you got coming?
Right. So we will be back on Thursday with David Kerr, director of Return of the Slasher Nurse, as well as the upcoming summer camp. Oh, man. He's an independent filmmaker. He makes things on ultra low budgets, crowdfunding. His work is intentionally kind of rock and roll in its spirit. He doesn't mind letting a few seams show as long as his heart is more prominent. So he'll be in to talk about where he stands in the genre and his productions. That should be fun. And then after that, of course, we have a couple more shows before the end of the month. And then in October, we have a full slate. If you love horror fiction, you need to stay tuned. I'm not announcing it until we get past this coming week, but I promise a lot of insanity and a lot of goodness is coming this way. Now, Tim.
Yes.
Where can people keep up with everything Tim Meyer?
I'm probably most active on Twitter. That's where you can find me and see my tweets and all the dumb things that I do. Instagram too. I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. I have a website /blog that doesn't get updated as frequently as it should, but that's timmeyerwrites.com. But yeah, pretty much Twitter is where you'll find me lurking around mostly.
Awesome. Hand convention. Well, someday,
once we're allowed.
Someday. We could just be all rolling around in glass cubes.
Yeah.
We'll meet with 4 inches of bulletproof glass between us.
Bubble boys.
Yeah. So I do want to invite you, if you want to come on to our community show on Saturday. It's a time when the community, all these wonderful people in the chat that make lots of noise, get on an open stream, and talk about whatever. It is a raucous time always. And
sounds like it. I'm trying to follow the comments, and there's a lot of intelligent conversation happening. You have a good audience, man. I have to say.
I have the best damn audience, and they're from all over the place.
That's awesome.
There's fans of film literature. There's people that love the convention scene of all stripes. It's also a very mixed audience of all people from all kinds of different backgrounds, and they're engaged, man. I have the best.
I agree. You do.
So I want to thank you for coming on, and I again invite you to join us anytime on the community shows, and we'll get back together when you're ready to release either the projects for the next year, so we can get people a little bit of advance warning that they're coming out.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I had a blast. Really appreciate the invite.
I really appreciate you coming on, man. And I will see you all on Thursday. Have a good night, guys.
Ev, I want to talk to Martin.
So talk.
Alone.
Crisp, flavorful fish sandwiches, golden brown and crunchy outside.
Everybody knows the weasel blows, but popcorn, she pops real good.